How do you keep your hearth warm when it's raining and windy outside? You probably don't know the answer to this question, but Native Americans certainly did. For the indigenous peoples of North America, fire was not just a source of heat, but the heart of life, the center of the community, and a sacred gift. Losing fire meant being defenseless against cold, hunger, and darkness. Therefore, the ability to obtain it from what nature provided was a key survival skill. Watch the video to the end to find out how 2 ordinary stones could save an entire tribe from a hungry winter, and what secret ingredient they carried with them in special pouches to ignite a flame in seconds. What if I told you that everything you believed about fire wasn't entirely true? For Native Americans, fire was not just a chemical reaction, but a living, breathing being with its own spirit. It was treated with the deepest respect and reverence, like an elder relative. The process of building a fire was never a mundane task. It was accompanied by rituals, prayers, and gratitude to the spirits for this gift. Fire was believed to be a mediator between the world of humans and the world of spirits, and smoke carried requests and prayers directly to the heavens. Fire was the focal point of any settlement, whether it was a teepee on the Great Plains or a longhouse of the Iroquois. Families gathered around it, stories were told, and important decisions were made. It witnessed births, deaths, and all significant events in the life of the community. The flame carried purity and had cleansing power. Before an important hunt or military campaign, warriors underwent rituals of purification with the smoke of sacred herbs. It was believed that this removed negative energy and brought good luck. The place for the fire was not chosen at random, it was considered sacred. The hearth was the heart of the home, and it was never left dirty. The coals were carefully preserved so that the next day a new flame could be kindled from them, symbolizing the continuity of life. Even firewood was treated with respect. Living trees were never cut down unless absolutely necessary. Dead wood was used, understanding that the tree had already given its life force and could now serve as warmth for people. Fire was a teacher that showed the cyclical nature of life. It was born from friction, grew, gave light and heat, and then died out, leaving behind coals ready to be reborn. This process reflected the eternal cycle of nature. This attitude shaped a completely different culture of interaction with nature. Fire was not conquered or used. It was cooperated with. It was a partnership based on deep understanding and mutual respect. This fundamental difference in worldview was the main secret of their survival. They did not fight nature, but were a harmonious part of it. That is why they were able to do what seems miraculous to modern man. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about such a spiritual approach to the forces of nature? Write about it in the comments. Want to know a secret that will change your life if you find yourself in the wild? The most common and reliable way to make fire was with a bow drill. This method, which required patience and skill, was a true work of engineering, where each element played a crucial role. The design consisted of several key parts. The bow was a flexible branch with a string made of leather or plant fibers. It served as a drive that rotated the main working element, the spindle. The spindle, or drill, was a straight stick made of hard but light wood, sharpened at both ends. It was made from woods such as yucca, willow, or poplar. It was this spindle that, when rotating, created the friction necessary for ignition. The lower end of the spindle rested in a special recess in a small board, or hearth board. This board was made of softer woods such as cedar or linden. Next to the recess, a small notch was made to collect the hot wood dust. To keep the spindle vertical and provide the necessary pressure, a cap or bearing was used. This could be a smooth stone with a recess, a piece of hardwood, or even bone. The cap was held in the hand, pressing the spindle against the board. The process began by wrapping the bowstring around the spindle. Then, after placing the spindle in the board and pressing it with the cap, the person began to move the bow back and forth. This caused the spindle to rotate rapidly in one place. The intense friction caused the tip of the spindle and the board to heat up and smoke. Fine black dust formed and accumulated in the recess. When the desired temperature of about 400 degrees Celsius was reached, this dust turned into smoldering embers. This was the most delicate moment, requiring concentration and experience. It was necessary to feel the right rhythm and pressure. Too little pressure did not produce the desired temperature, and too much could break the spindle. When the ember was formed, it was carefully transferred to a prepared tinder. A light and rhythmic blow inflated the ember, and a living flame was born from the smoke. This moment was the culmination of long and painstaking work. Mastering the bow drill is only half the battle. What if I told you that even the hottest ember is useless without one secret ingredient that was more valuable than gold? Read on to the next chapter to learn about the art of creating the perfect tinder. The secret passed down from generation to generation is not the ability to create a spark, but the ability to catch and nurture it. The smoldering ember produced by the drill is incredibly fragile. To turn it into a flame, a perfect nest, tinder, was needed. Indigenous peoples were true experts in finding and preparing tinder. They knew which plants and materials had the necessary properties. The main criterion was the ability of the material to smolder from the slightest spark and give off steady heat. One of the best materials was cattail fluff, which grows in swamps. It was collected in the fall when its inflorescences ripened. This fluff was incredibly light, airy, and ignited instantly. An equally valuable resource was the inner bark of certain trees, such as juniper or cedar. The bark was removed from dry trees, kneaded for a long time, and split by hand until it turned into a soft, cotton-like mass. This fiber caught embers well and smoldered for a long time. Certain types of bracket fungi were considered a real treasure. The fungus was cut from the tree, dried, and then boiled in ash to make it more susceptible to fire. Treated in this way, the bracket fungus, known as amadu, could smolder for hours. Dry moss, crushed wormwood, and even the fluff from certain types of thistles were also used as tinder. Each region had its own secrets and favorite materials. This knowledge was passed down by word of mouth and was essential for survival. Preparing tinder was an art form. The material had to be completely dry. It was collected in sunny weather and stored in special waterproof bags made of leather or birch bark. This bag of tinder was one of the most valuable things a warrior or hunter carried with them. Losing it was equivalent to losing matches in the modern world. Life depended directly on its preservation. When the ember was ready, it was carefully placed in the center of the tinder nest. Then the nest was carefully folded, surrounding the ember on all sides. A light, even breath through cupped hands saturated the ember with oxygen, causing it to flare up. At some point, the first small tongue of flame burst through the smoke. It was a triumph, the result of deep knowledge, patience, and respect for nature. The secret was not in strength, but in understanding the delicate process of creating fire. What I am about to show you would have been forbidden in medieval Europe, as it would have been considered magic. In addition to the friction method, there was another faster way to obtain fire: striking sparks. This required two special stones, flint and pyrite. Flint is a hard mineral that produces sharp fragments when struck against another hard object. It was this property that was used to make arrowheads and knives. But it had another secret: the ability to strike bright, hot sparks. Pyrite, or its variety marcasite, was used in conjunction with flint. This mineral, known as fool's gold, contains iron and sulfur. When flint strikes pyrite sharply, tiny particles of iron fly off. These particles instantly heat up from friction and, reacting with oxygen in the air, ignite. This is how a spark is born, a tiny burning piece of metal. The temperature of such a spark could reach thousands of degrees. The technique required precision and skill. The stones were held close to the tinder so that the spark would not go out in flight. The blow had to be sliding and sharp at the right angle. This method was much faster and less labor-intensive than a bow drill. It did not require dry weather, as the sparks were not affected by moisture. However, it had a significant drawback. It required specific minerals. Flint and pyrite were not found everywhere. Their deposits were well known and highly valued. These stones often became the subject of trade between tribes, traveling hundreds of kilometers. A fire-making kit consisting of a piece of flint, pyrite, and a pouch of tinder was a standard part of a warrior's equipment. It was compact and allowed a fire to be started in seconds in any situation. This was a huge tactical advantage. The ability to find the right stones and use them correctly was as important a skill as hunting or tracking. It was part of a deep geological knowledge accumulated over generations. They read the earth like an open book. But getting fire is only the beginning. How do you keep it and yourself warm when a blizzard is raging around you? In the next chapter, you'll learn about ingenious methods of heat conservation that allowed people to survive in the harshest conditions. The main secret to surviving in the cold is not the ability to make fire, but the ability to stay dry. Wet clothing loses its insulating properties and draws heat from the body at a catastrophic rate. Indigenous peoples understood this and paid great attention to protection from moisture. Their clothing was not just a cover, but a complex protection system. The main material was animal skins, which were treated in a special way. They were kneaded for a long time and smoked over smoke, which made the skin soft, durable, and partially waterproof. To enhance the water-repellent properties, clothing impregnated with fats was the norm. It was regularly lubricated with animal fat, such as bear or beaver fat. The fat filled the pores in the skin, preventing water from penetrating inside. This treatment made leather shirts, leggings, and moccasins effective protection against rain and wet snow. It was the world's first membrane technology, created thousands of years before the advent of modern materials. It prevented the outside from getting wet, but allowed the body to breathe. In regions with heavy rainfall, such as the Northwest coast, Native Americans made raincoats and hats from cedar bark. The bark fibers were woven so tightly that water simply rolled off them. This clothing was lightweight and completely waterproof. Footwear also had its secrets. Winter moccasins were made tall and sewn from thick leather. Insoles made of dry grass or moss were placed inside, which absorbed sweat and created an additional insulating layer. These insoles were regularly replaced with dry ones. Each hunter carried a supply of this insulation with him. It was a simple but ingenious way to combat trench foot, long before its official discovery. Layering was of great importance. Instead of one thick garment, they wore several thinner ones. The air gap between the layers served as an excellent insulator. Fur and feather headdresses were not just decoration. They protected the head, through which a significant amount of heat escapes from the cold and wind. Every detail of their costume was functional and well thought out. Thus, they did not wait until they got wet and cold and then heroically build a fire. They did everything they could to prevent this from happening. Preventing a problem was always more important to them than dealing with its consequences. What if everything you've been taught about primitive dwellings is wrong? Bark and skin shelters were not just tents, but high-tech structures perfectly adapted to retain heat. Their design was the result of centuries of observation and experimentation. Take, for example, the teepees of the Great Plains tribes. Their conical shape was no accident. It gave the dwelling incredible resistance to the strong winds that constantly blow across the prairies. The heart of the teepee was the hearth, located right in the center. Smoke escaped through an opening at the top, which could be regulated using two special poles with valves. This system allowed for the creation of draft and control of smoke, depending on the direction of the wind. The lower edge of the teepee's covering did not reach the ground. This gap provided a constant supply of fresh air to the fire, which was necessary for combustion. Inside, along the walls, an additional canopy was often installed, which created an air gap and protected against drafts. In forest regions, wigwams and longhouses were built. Their frames were made of flexible trunks of young trees and covered with large layers of birch or elm bark. The bark was an excellent insulator, protecting against both cold and heat. Particular attention was paid to the location of the dwelling. It was never built in a low-lying area where cold air and water accumulated. A place on a small hill, protected from the prevailing wind by a forest or hill, was always chosen. A primitive but effective drainage system was often created around the dwelling. A shallow groove was dug to divert rainwater away from the walls. This prevented water from seeping inside and kept the floor dry. In subarctic regions, they built semi-dugouts. The dwelling was partially sunk into the ground, using it as a natural insulator. This design allowed them to survive in extremely low temperatures. The floor inside any dwelling was covered with branches and grass, and skins were laid on top. This created a multi-layered insulation from the cold ground. People did not sit or sleep on the bare ground. Each dwelling was not just a shelter, but an entire ecosystem built around a fire. Its task was to preserve this precious heat and protect it from wind and moisture. Architecture and survival were inextricably linked. Clothing protected the body, but what protected the fire itself and the family from the elements? In the next chapter, we will look inside the dwellings of indigenous peoples and uncover the secrets of their ingenious architecture. The ability to light a fire was only the first step. Equally important was the ability to maintain it. This required a deep understanding of the properties of different types of wood, because not all firewood burns the same. Indigenous peoples were true experts on the forest. They could distinguish between dozens of tree species and knew exactly which ones were best suited for a fire. This skill was as important as knowing which plants were edible. Soft woods such as pine or spruce were used to quickly ignite and create a large flame. Their resin-rich wood ignited easily and gave off a lot of light, but it also burned out very quickly. For a long and hot fire on which food was cooked or which had to keep warm all night, hardwoods were chosen. Oak, maple, and hickory. Their dense wood burned slowly and evenly, leaving behind hot coals. It was these coals that were used to heat the dwelling. The main secret was to use only dry wood. Wet wood burned poorly, smoked heavily, and spent most of its energy evaporating moisture rather than generating heat. Therefore, gathering firewood was a constant and important task. They never took wood from the ground, as it was almost always damp. Dead wood, dead but still standing trees, was considered the ideal fuel. Their wood was dry and seasoned. Thick logs were split to get to the dry core. Even in wet weather, dry wood could always be found inside a large log. Knowing how to split a log correctly was an important skill. Different types of wood were used for specific purposes. The wood of some fruit trees produced fragrant smoke, which was used for smoking meat. Other species, on the contrary, burned with almost no smoke, which was important for camouflaging the camp. There were also forbidden trees that were never used for firewood. Some of them could emit poisonous smoke when burned. This knowledge was part of their safety precautions. Thus, fire management was a complex science. It required not only obtaining a flame, but also feeding it correctly. The choice of firewood determined whether the fire would be an effective source of heat or simply a smoldering, smoky mess. Starting a fire from scratch, even for a master, was a laborious process. Therefore, when a tribe moved to a new place, they often did not start a new fire, but carried it with them. It was much easier and faster. Special fire containers were used for this purpose. These could be large shells, hollowed out pieces of wood, or even clay pots. The main purpose of such a container was to protect the smoldering material from the wind and retain heat. Slow smoldering material was placed inside the container. The tinder fungus was ideal for this purpose. It could smolder without an open flame for many hours. Rotten wood, pieces of old decayed wood, was also used. It was also capable of smoldering for a long time. It was carefully placed in the container and sprinkled with ash to reduce oxygen access and slow down combustion. The responsibility for carrying the fire was usually assigned to a specific person. It was an honorable and very important mission. Losing the fire on the way was a great misfortune for the entire community. Upon arrival at a new location, the smoldering coal was removed from the container. It was placed in a prepared tinder, a few strong breaths, and the fire at the new campsite was ready. This method saved a tremendous amount of time and effort. It was especially important during long journeys or in bad weather, when it was difficult to find dry material for kindling a fire. It was a kind of living lighter. This practice once again emphasizes the value of fire in their culture. It was not taken for granted, but treated as a treasure to be cherished and preserved. It was a constant companion to humans. The ability to keep a smoldering ember alive for several days required a great deal of experience. It was necessary to know exactly how much ash to add and how to ensure a minimal flow of air. This was another secret knowledge passed down within the tribe. The idea of carrying fire rather than creating it shows their rational and practical approach to survival. They always chose the path of least resistance if it led to their goal. Why do complicated work if it can be avoided? Fire was not only a source of heat and light, it was a universal tool that Native Americans used in many different areas of their lives. Its use went far beyond simple heating. They used fire to make tools and weapons. To make a spear or arrow stronger, they burned the ends over coals. Wood hardened in this way became as hard as bone. Fire was the main tool in the creation of dugout canoes. Large logs were not hollowed out by hand, which would have been hellish work. Hot coals were poured onto the surface, which burned the wood, and then the charred layer was scraped off. This process was repeated many times, gradually forming the interior space of the boat. Fire did most of the work, and humans only controlled the process. This is how large and reliable boats capable of carrying several people were created. In agriculture, fire was used to clear fields. Controlled burns destroyed weeds and fertilized the soil with ash. It was an effective farming system that did not require a plow. Fire was also a weapon. Burning arrows could sow panic in the enemy's camp or set fire to fortifications. Smoke from fires was used to create a smokescreen during tactical maneuvers. With the help of smoke signals, they created a complex long-distance communication system. Various combinations of smoke columns allowed messages to be transmitted over tens of kilometers. It was the world's first optical telegraph. Fire was also used in medicine. A red-hot knife tip was used to cauterize wounds to stop bleeding and disinfect them. The smoke from medicinal herbs was used to fumigate patients during inhalation treatments. Even pottery could not do without fire. Clay pots were fired in a bonfire to make them strong and waterproof. The temperature and firing time were strictly controlled. Thus, fire was the key to technological development. It allowed people to process materials, build, fight, and heal. Mastery of fire was what separated survival from prosperity. The story of how indigenous peoples obtained fire is not just a set of instructions for survival. It is a profound lesson about the relationship between humans and nature. This lesson is based on observation, respect, and understanding, not brute force. They prove that complex technology is not necessary for a comfortable life. Everything you need is already in the world around you. You just need the knowledge to see it and apply it correctly. Their methods were environmentally friendly and sustainable. They took from nature exactly what they needed and used resources with maximum efficiency. There was no waste or pollution. Every element of the system, from choosing a tree for a spindle to preparing tinder, was part of a holistic view of the world. There were no random or unnecessary details. Everything was interconnected and had its own deep meaning. Modern humans, having lost these skills, have become dependent on external sources of energy. We press a button and heat appears, but we do not understand the nature of this process. We have lost our connection to the source. The history of fire among Native Americans is a reminder that true power lies not in technology, but in knowledge. Knowledge cannot be lost or broken. It always remains with a person. It teaches us patience and attentiveness. The process of obtaining fire by friction does not tolerate haste. It requires concentration and calmness, qualities that are so lacking in the modern world. This story is not a call to abandon matches and return to caves. It is an invitation to reflect on our place in the world. Perhaps we should learn from those who knew how to live in harmony with nature, rather than fight against it. Their fire warmed not only the body, but also the soul. It was a symbol of community, the continuity of generations, and a connection to something greater than just the material world. It was a wisdom that we have almost lost. By remembering these skills, we pay tribute to the genius and resilience of these peoples. They were true masters of survival, whose lessons are still relevant today. Their fire continues to burn in the pages of history, lighting our way. We see that for Native Americans, obtaining fire was not just a technical task, but an art form woven into the fabric of their culture and spirituality. From a philosophical approach to fire to ingenious engineering solutions, such as bow drills and drainage systems in dwellings, everything was part of a unified system of survival. They did not simply struggle against nature, they understood its laws and lived in accordance with them. Every aspect, from waterproof clothing impregnated with fats to choosing the right firewood, was honed by centuries of observation and practice. This knowledge was their greatest asset, allowing them to thrive in conditions that seem extreme to us today. This legacy reminds us that the most effective solutions are often the simplest and most harmonious. Please suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on our channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes.